الله سبحان الله الله حمدا لله 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 الله يا حنان الله يا ديان الله يا حنان الله يا سبحان الله سبحان الله الله حمدا لله الله سبحان الله الله حمدا لله الله يا برهان الله يا سلطان الله يا غفران الله يا سبحان الله يا سبحان الله سبحان الله الله حمدا لله الله سبحان الله الله حمدا لله الله سبحان الله الله حمدا لله الله سبحان الله الله حمدا لله
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah wa billah wa fi sabilillah wa ala millati Rasulullah, a program dedicated to the exegesis of the Quran, fragrance of inspiration. Welcome. In this program, we are looking at the chapter of Surah Araf, which is chapter number 7 of the Quran. And for this exegesis, we have Sheikh Dr. Bahmanpur, who is the head of the Research Islamic Center and also deputy for the Islamic Center of England. Sheikh been sharing with us and inspiring us with the exegesis from the Quran, and we have reached to verse number 35. As pointed out earlier, Sheikh have mentioned that this chapter, it's an all-comprehensive chapter. It is the story of earth, basically beginning from before the creation, or before the creation of even Adam, where few verses point out to how Allah created in 6 days, which Sheikh will shed some light in the future. So therefore it's a very all-comprehensive chapter, and Sheikh decided to look into this chapter, and we have reached to verse number 35. Welcome, Sheikh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you very much, and my greetings to the viewers who are following these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh. Sheikh, if you may recall, we you pointed out to earlier in relation to the fahsha, which was perhaps the last verse that you talked in detail about, which points out to that being sodomy, being adultery and homosexuality, where Quran uses fahsha for these two realities or phenomena. Is the verse which is right after that talks about ajal, about the fixed period being given to the nations?
Yes, that's right. The verse which follows the previous verse, which of course Allah talked about fawahish, قُلْ إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ رَبِّيَ الْفَوَاحِشَ مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ. The following verse, which is verse number 34, says وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ عَجَلٍ فَإِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهُمْ لَا يَسْتَأْخِرُونَ سَاعَةً وَلَا يَسْتَقْدِمُونَ. And for every nation there is an appointed time. So when that appointed time of them comes, they would not come forth 1 hour and would not be postponed for 1 hour. So their time would not come forth for 1 hour and not postponed for 1 hour. The verse is clearly related to what went previously, because Allah talked about fawahish being committed by nations, talked about ithm and baghy being committed by nations, talked about slandering and attributing to God things which were not true by nations. Now this verse says that, now do not think that you are living now in mercy of God, you are living in your own leisure. Do not think that this is going to continue forever. You take it for granted. You think that you do all these things and nothing will happen. So do not take all these for granted, because for every nation there is an appointed time. وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ أَجَلٌ. Now, ummah, which we just translate as nation, or it could be translated as community. Ummah are a group of people with some fixed bounds between them. Now, these bounds could be tribal bounds, could be in terms of lineage, and could be cultural ties, which usually this is more apparent in terms of nations. Even it could be religious bounds. Therefore, we talk about Ummatul Islam, Ummatul Nasara, Ummatul Yahud. That means the people, they may have very diverse cultures, like Muslims. They have quite diverse cultures, diverse civilizations. However, they are bound together by certain things. And now, in terms of Ummatul Islam, it is that certain thing is the creed and belief that they have in one religion, which makes them one ummah. Now, we have to actually clarify here, what do we mean by this ummah for which there is an appointed time? لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ أَجَلٌ. Does this include those people who are bound together or share common beliefs, for example? Is there an ajal for that as well? Or it is only for those who share sort of culture, a sort of defined values and aims and goals for their society? This is an ummah, and this is what we mean having an appointed time. Now, apparently, لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ أَجَلٌ does not include religions, because for religions there is no ajal. Religions continue. Like Ummatul Islam, there is no ajal for it. Or even Christianity, Judaism, there is no ajal, no appointed time for it. It carries on. So, virtually, what is meant by لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ أَجَلٌ are different civilizations, different societies which are sharing certain culture agreed upon by everyone. That is ummah. And this is actually the type of nation or community which may share values which allow fawahish, which allow ithm and baghi, which allow attributing to God that God has not allowed or revealed to us. This is that type of nation. So for all these nations, with the definition that I mentioned, there is an ajal, there is an appointed time. So do not take the continuation of what you are living in for granted.
It is nothing. There's no negativity in terms of ajal. I mean, that's something that is usual. That is common. I mean, there's no such thing as negativity in this verse. It's just trying to point out that there is a fixed period for every nation.
It may be true if we talk about individual human beings. Then, of course, there is no negative aspect, because individual human beings should actually leave this world. Leaving this world is like a new birth to another world. Right. However, when we talk about nations, their appointed time or their ajal is different. That means they are doing something wrong.
Okay.
And the appointed time is going to come.
Right.
Otherwise, if they do not do it, we have other verses which actually says, in some ummahs, there is no change at all. There is no ajal for some ummahs. Theoretical, hypothetical ummahs. What is that? إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah never changes a status which people are enjoying unless they change themselves. If they change, if they divert, if they deviate, then of course the change will come. And therefore, we may say that yes, there is a negative aspect here, that civilizations, nations, and especially civilizations, if you look into the history, civilizations have always withered away because of corruption, have always withered away because they became arrogant, they started to oppress, they started to trespass the limits of human values, and then they went towards ruin and destruction. We have seen civilizations which have lasted in this world for several thousand years.
Right,
And
you-
they
I-
have just...
yeah. I remember last week you were talking about the Samud,
Mm.
2,500 or
Yeah,
more,
about 3,000
3,000 years.
Yeah, yeah.
However, we tend to think that, oh, what's happening? Why the ajal doesn't come for a
Yeah.
certain group of people who are doing wrong?
That's right.
So it takes a very long.
We actually want God to act according to our haste, and this is clearly wrong. God, of course, is not in any hurry, is not in any haste, and His wisdom actually implies that things should develop and unfold so that they go towards their corrosion time, and this is what will happen. And this is what is mentioned actually in Surah Isra. وَإِذَا أَرَدْنَا أَن نُهْلِكَ قَرْيَةً أَمَرْنَا مُتْرَفِيهَا فَفَسَقُوا فِيهَا فَحَقَّ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقَوْلُ فَدَمَّرْنَاهَا تَدْمِيرًا. If we want to destroy a nation, if this ajal comes, now how the ajal comes, we أَمَرْنَا مُتْرَفِيهَا means we actually command the well-to-do in that community. Well, mutraf is not only well-to-do, is a well-to-do who is negligent of any aim in this world. Aimless, well-to-do people, these are mutrafun. Now, we command them to do evil. We command them to do evil means that naturally they will go towards it. That is the rule, that's the law. If they forget, if they are negligent of me, and if I have given them so much, then naturally they go towards it. So they start to corrupt the society. فَفَسَقُوا فِيهَا. They trespass, they do all sorts of impermissible things, and then it goes towards this ajal. أمرنا مترفيها ففسقوا فيها فحق عليها القول. قول, what is قول? قول of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is His law, is His rule, the code, the standard that He has set. So when this happens, then that standard applies to it. حق عليها القول, that standard applies to it. And when it applies to it, then of course it moves towards destruction. Now here, one very important thing should be noticed, and that is there is a difference between death of individuals and death of nations. Here Allah says nations have their own appointed time. We have a certain time of death for nations, and by death of nations we mean that all those shared values, culture, power, arrogance, dignity which is attached to that culture, they will die away. So it doesn't mean that every individual in that nation would die. Like say, for example, the mushrikun in Mecca, not all of them died. However, the whole culture disappeared, the whole ummah,
Right.
ummatul shirk disappeared.
Not necessarily where they are, I mean, they die away in the sense that there be some sort of famine or they just completely vanish, but it's a gradual deterioration where one fades away, you know, those values disappears, like the Arabs of the Jahiliyyah, such as. Can we say that, or is it really like an azab?
It doesn't actually come quite forth with the term ajal, because ajal is appointed time. So here there is a threat in it here, actually.
Right. So it's more of an azabi sort
more of a
tone,
destruction
yeah,
that will
destruction,
come to the
right.
nation.
Right.
And of course, this destruction may come due to arrogance, due to many other things. However, what you say is actually true, that there is an appointed time for the peak of every nation, for the blossoming of every nation, and after they blossom, then they start to go down because of the corruption, which of course is somehow an accompaniment of this sort of abundance in civilizations that we find. Now, here we see that the Quran gives importance to two things. Gives importance to individual, and at the same time gives importance to nations, to communities. Both of them are very important, and both of them have actually a share on human mindset, behavior, individuals and communities. Actually, if there was not that very individual initiation inside every human being, then no one could have actually escaped from the culture in which they are born. And if the culture doesn't have a hold on individuals, of course, individuals would not grow up according to that culture, which usually happens. And this is what we find very interestingly later on in this surah, when we come to Ayatul Dhar. وإذ أخذنا من بني آدم وإذ أخذ ربك من بني آدم من ظهورهم ذريتهم وأشهدهم على أنفسهم ألست بربكم قالوا بلى. The pledge which is taken in every human individual heart and fitra is somehow to defy the influence of the ummah or the community which has a hold on individual. Those verses says that we have taken this pledge so that أن تقولوا يوم القيامة إنا كنا عن هذا غافلين. So individually you cannot be ignorant of that. And secondly, أو تقولوا إنما أشرك آباؤنا من قبل وكنا ذرية من بعدهم أفتهلكنا بما فعل المبتلون. So our community, our fathers, our culture was influencing us in what we did. Allah says it has a big influence, but we have given you that initial and personal initiation that we have placed in every individual. So the verse actually puts an end to all those discussions that if you try to escape from all these advice, and if you try to ignore it, then remember لكل أمة أجل فإذا جاء أجلهم لا يستأخرون ساعة ولا يستقدمون. There's a very interesting statement in Nahj al-Balagha about how communities are regarded to be communities, and that is the shared culture and shared values. Amirul Mu'minin alayhi salam in the statement number 201 in Nahj al-Balagha, he says that أيها الناس إنما يجمع الناس الرضا والسخط وإنما أقر ناقة ثمود رجل واحد منهم فأمهم الله بالعذاب لما أموه بالرضا فقال سبحانه فأقروها فأصبحوا نادمين. O people, you should know that what brings people together is الرضا والسخط, to be happy with something and to be unhappy with something. If you are happy with something, if you are pleased with a value, a culture, an act, a behavior, and others share this happiness with you, this pleasure with you, then you are regarded as one people, one ummah, one community. And if you, on the opposite, if you are displeased with something and other people share with you that displeasure, then of course you are regarded to be one ummah. So what brings people together is ar-rida wa sukht. Now, then he brings a very interesting example from the Quran and says that إنما عقر ناقة ثمود رجل واحد فأمهم الله بالعذاب. The she camel of Thamud, which was a miracle, asked by them from Saleh, and it was given to them as a miracle, carved out of a rock, a huge rock. He says they killed him. One of them only killed him, not everyone. However, Allah included everyone in punishment. فَأَمَّهُمُ اللَّهُ بِالْعَذَابِ. Why? لَمَّا أَمُّوهُ بِالرَّضَى. Because they all offered him their pleasure. They all were pleased about this. And therefore, what happened was that Allah included everyone in punishment. It made them one ummah, it made them one community. This is how communities are defined actually, as shared values, being pleased with shared behavior, shared value, shared culture. This is what makes an ummah to be an ummah. And this shows that if things do happen in the world around us, or has happened in the history before us, we can have a position towards them, although we may not have any action or any influence in the course of those events. However, if we have a certain tendency towards it, whether negative or positive, then we are regarded to be as part of those who are committing that act, or who have committed that act in the past. Now, this is about, of course, ummah. Then we come to the fourth advice of the Quran after the mention of the story of Adam and Eve. Verse number 35, Ya bani Adam, imma ya'tiyannakum rusulun minkum yaqussuna alaykum ayati faman ittaqa wa aslaha fala khawfun alayhim wala hum yahzanun.
If you just quickly give a translation, maybe we'll take a short break and then we'll continue.
And it says, O children of Adam, should any messengers come to you from amongst yourselves who would relate to you our verses, our signs, whoever takes heed, has taqwa, and reforms and corrects their behavior, then there should be no fear, no sadness for them.
Right. So basically, it's kind of like balancing. One is the question of ajal, and then right after that, it's in order to balance. Perhaps I think you can give a more detail right after the short break. In the first part, we looked at the definition of ummat. Sheikh pointed out to that how ummat is defined as from Nahjul Balagha and also from the Quran. To really give a very brief version of it is a group of or a society sharing values, culture, and principles, and then at the same time, Sheikh also looked into the lexical or the more detailed version of the word ajal, what really it means. Does it have a positive or a negative tendency within that word, which he said it seems to indicate towards that it is something that is negative, a fixed period where the azab, where the punishment of God descends upon a society, upon a community, ummah, who have gone astray. Stay with us right after this short break.
عليك يا أجمل خلق الله صلاة الله سلام الله صلاة الله سلام الله عليك يا أجمل خلق الله عليك يا أجمل خلق الله إذا كنت في نعمة فرها فإن المعاصي تزيل النعم إذا كنت في نعمة فرعها فإن المعاصي تزيل النعم وداوم علي بشوق الإله فإن الإله كثير النعم صلاة الله سلام الله صلاة الله سلام الله عليك يا أجمل خلق الله عليك يا أجمل خلق الله فسبحان من عمنا فضله.
Welcome back. We are looking at the exegesis of Surah Araf, the chapter 7, and we have reached to verse number 35, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assures mankind that if they comply by what God have commanded, there isn't any worry for them. However, the exact translation and the meaning of this verse, we will ask the Shaykh to enlighten us. Verse number 35, Surah Araf.
Yes, actually, this verse is concluding the whole discussion right from the beginning of the surah up to here. And that is, children of Adam, now that you are not in that garden, now that you are out on the earth, and you feel that you are alone, but you shouldn't really think that you are alone. I have not abandoned you. Although you are on the earth now, although you are on your own, although you have to provide for yourself things from what I have provided for you, however, do not feel that you are abandoned. You are not forsaken. My messengers will come to you. And when my messengers come and relate to you my verses, then if you have taqwa and if you do islah, then no fear, no sadness, no sorrow. La khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. Now, of course, this is actually a restitutional sort of a statement, saying that don't think that things have gone wrong. You are in the same place, you are in the same position with me, and I will send messengers to you. You follow them, then there is no problem. Now here, four concepts are mentioned. One is فَمَنِ اتَّقَى, well, two are فَمَنِ اتَّقَى وَأَصْلَحَ. So taqwa and islah. If my messengers come and your reaction towards them are these two, taqwa and islah. مَنِ اتَّقَى وَأَصْلَحَ. Now, taqwa is to fear God in the sense that you do not do things, fear in that sense, you do not do things which would be contrary to your belief in God, to your belief in His system of justice. This is the meaning of taqwa. So taqwa is to avoid, this is taqwa, to avoid something which is wrong. Islah is actually the opposite, to do things which are right. So, man ittaqa wa aslaha means that if you avoid things which are wrong and do things which are right, then two things, no khawf, no huzn. Khawf is usually a sort of feeling about the future. This is khawf. A worry that you have about the future. And huzn is almost the same feeling about what is presently available, existing around you. So, for example, I'm sad because I don't have certain things. I'm sad because I have a very destitute situation. But I may not have any of these, but I may fear that in future I become destitute. I may fear in future that something happens. So this is khawf and huzn. Now Allah says, not for your present life, not for hereafter.
So the sorrow or the huzn is hereafter.
The khawf is
for the hereafter. Okay.
And huzn is for this world.
All right.
No khawf and no huzn. However, when we talk about khawf and huzn, we can take it relatively. Both khawf and huzn can be in this world, because for example, I may be afraid of 10 years time ahead of mine.
Right.
Although I may not live that long, but it's human mind. It actually imagines things.
Right.
And relatively there is no khawf and no huzn in this world. And of course in the hereafter, absolutely there is no khawf and no huzn. Because in this world everything is relative. In the hereafter, it's absolute. There is no absolute khawf, no absolute huzn. So this concludes the whole discussion that, O children of Adam, if my messengers come to you and you comply by abandoning what is wrong and doing what is wrong, right, attiqa al-islah, then فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. And the opposite, وَالَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. Now, these messengers come, they relate my ayat to you. However, if the reaction is to deny or to belie those ayat, وَالَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا وَاسْتَكْبَرُوا عَنْهَا. Now, اسْتَكْبَرُوا عَنْهَا is a very interesting concept here, because it's not only denying or belying, it's denying and belying out of arrogance, out of self-centeredness, if you are self-centered and you deny. Sometimes you deny because you don't know, because you're ignorant, because you don't have enough knowledge.